I can say is, ooh, crippling loss at the ballot box. Check. 4 interceptions in the fourth quarter against the Miami Dolphins. Possibly a debilitating defeat. Check. And yes, season-ending injury to critical star on defense. That's new. Check. Welcome to Bolts on Tap. John Gennaro is back after a week off. Good to have you, John. Thanks to Jeff Siniard for sitting in last week. Chargers lose to the Miami Dolphins 31-24. We are live at Social Tap San Diego, just outside Petco Park on J Street. If you're in the area downtown, doing a lively business on Monday. The reason why? Probably not us. It's because the food is spectacular.
It's great.
And the location is awesome, but they're kind enough to host our show.
I had ever seen Phillip Rivers play that poorly, and I said, yeah, the last 5 or 6 games before Norv Turner got fired, this was a weekly thing with Phillip Rivers. But bad in that regard. He certainly doesn't want to move to Los Angeles, and that prospect seems more real now that the vote got, not just didn't pass, but didn't even hit the 50% threshold. And we're going to talk about, there was a report about Dean Spanos being upset about that. Really bad week for Phillip Rivers, really bad week for the Chargers, really bad week for Charger fans in general.
Hector is wasting no time on the Facebook comments, and this is an interactive show, so if you want to join the discussion, you can just comment along on Facebook. He says, last week, I told you the problem was Rivers. Again, the problem is Rivers. Tell me I'm wrong again, because I don't think I am. Yesterday, you weren't wrong. It's so very rare. It's so common. We can come and talk about the big defensive failure that the Chargers made, or the crippling fumble that caused the loss, or, hey, Mike McCoy. We can blame him most Sundays when the Chargers end up coming up short. But while football is a team game, and Phillip Rivers wasn't getting outstanding protection yesterday by the offensive line, you really have to put the loss on his shoulders. 4 interceptions. And it's easy to just, say, wow, that was horrible. But you have to expect that, even from a great quarterback, every once in a while. And I go back to the game when the Chargers intercepted Peyton Manning 6 times at Qualcomm Stadium. Back in, the 2007 season, Antonio Cromartie had 3 of them. Even the greats are going to throw in a stinker, maybe once a season, maybe once every 2 seasons. And that's the reason why you can't afford to lose all those other close games that you had a chance to win. Every team, Tom Brady, they have to assume they're going to just throw in a terrible game once in a while. That's why it's so hard to go 16-0, even if you have a phenomenally good team in the NFL. And this was Phillip Rivers' game, or just his fourth quarter, where he just didn't see the guys. He made a bad throw, made a couple of bad decisions, and it snowballed out of control, and it turned what should have been another Chargers win into yet another Chargers loss, sitting at 4-6 going into this bye week, when they should easily be 7-3, maybe 8-2 at this point of the year, and I don't think there's any way to argue against that.
Okay, Phillip Rivers, and there isn't. Phillip Rivers, yes, he had a bad week, but he is far down on my list of guys that are having bad weeks. Right at the top of that list is the offensive line, which, look, they're not injured. They don't have that excuse again. They are healthy. The starting offensive line in week 1 was the offensive line yesterday, except for a few plays here and there. It's the big name, big money left tackle, big name, big money left guard, big name, big money right tackle, and also Matt Slauson, who they're paying a bunch for, and DJ Fluker, who was a first-round pick. And you know what happened? Melvin Gordon got 2.9 yards per carry on the ground, and Phillip Rivers couldn't stand in the pocket. He couldn't stand in the pocket. Phillip Rivers, because of his weird motion, needs to be able to step up in the pocket to put that oomph behind his throw. And Matt Slauson, Orlando Franklin, and DJ Fluker could not keep the pocket from collapsing into him. He couldn't step into his throws. And so, yes, he threw 4 interceptions, but, and I don't want to take all the blame off him, his offensive line lost him the game. They lost him the game.
Joe Barksdale was probably the Chargers' best offensive lineman last season.
Yep.
And he was rewarded with a new contract, and all of a sudden I'm getting flashes of Jared Gaither. The
No,
one
no,
good season,
no.
and then what happened to Joe Barksdale?
Well, so Jared Gaither just didn't care. Jared Gaither came in to get paid. He got paid, and then he didn't care. There's another name that people should be thinking about when they think about Joe Barksdale this year, and it's not Jared Gaither. It's King Dunlap. Because King Dunlap came in his first year and outplayed expectations, and everyone thought, wow, Tom Telesco really scored on this one. He found a franchise left tackle and a guy that no one thought was any good. And what happened after that? We found all of King Dunlap's flaws. He can't stay healthy. He's not that great. You can get around him. And so this year with Joe Barksdale, you're seeing all the flaws that led to the St. Louis Rams releasing him last season. He was available for the Chargers for a reason a year ago, and that's because he's kind of a flawed player. And unfortunately for the Chargers, they had to pay him. They needed to pay him, and he's regressed back to the player he was before the Chargers signed him.
All right, Nathan comments in, and I was going to save this for a little later in the half hour, but I think we need to address it. He says, surely this is the last we see of McCoy and company. Complete overhaul needed.
Oh, sure. I hope so.
4-6 heading into the bye week with 6 games to go. Do you believe Mike McCoy will be back next season? What do the Chargers need to do to save his job, to not save his job, depending on what your perspective is? Because I'm going to say this. I was at Chargers Park this morning. Won't say any names, just talking to just staffers around there. And there is a strong belief in that building that Mike McCoy will be back next season, barring like 4-12 again, like losing the last 6 games.
Morons. Absolute morons. Morons if you believe that, and morons if he stays. I believe it was Darren Smith who tweeted this out earlier today, but I just want to point this out. Mike McCoy did not inherit a bad team. This was not Ken Whisenhunt going into the Tennessee Titans to try and reboot the franchise. He took over a team that was 9-7 already. He took over a team that was on the cusp of the playoffs. They haven't been in first place since October 25th, 2015.
Not in first place. Out of
last place. Out of last place.
They
haven't been out of last place since October 20. I totally blew that. Since October 25th, 2015. That is over a year of sitting in last place. Over a year that Mike McCoy has not coached a team that wasn't in last place. That's terrible. The idea that they're going to let him keep this team in the basement of the division for over a year and bring him back, they deserve everything, every bit of criticism they get if they do that.
Let's have a frank talk about playoff chances, because it might be our last discussion on that topic this season. If the Chargers came out of the bye, and by the way, they're going to be without Brandon Mebane coming out of the bye, because that was the new defensive injury I alluded to at the beginning. Torn biceps muscle, first reported by Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, now confirmed locally as well. He is out for the season. So,
awesome.
Critical middle of the defensive line guy has been terrific this season. Chargers will now be without him moving forward. Somehow the Chargers catch lightning in a bottle and win their last 6 games to get to 10-6. There's no guarantee they're making the playoffs at 10-6.
No, not at all. And did you see me tweet about this morning?
I did not.
Okay, so I did the math. Very rough math, and by all means, don't trust my math. But for the Chargers to catch the Denver Broncos, who sit in third place, the Chargers need to go 6-0 the rest of the way, and the Broncos need to go 2-4.
3-3 would be a tie, would bring tiebreakers
right, but
into the scenario.
I think it's almost impossible for them to win those tiebreakers because their divisional record is already 1-3.
And the Broncos are 1-2, so it's not over. The Chargers would be 3-3 in that scenario. The Broncos likely will take it if they end up going 3-3. Likely one of those will be a division loss, so it's possible the Chargers could win that tiebreaker.
Then it goes to, after the divisional records match up, then it goes to conference record, in which case the win over the Atlanta Falcons really didn't help you all that much, and the wins over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers aren't going to help you that much. So at this point, I'm not saying there's no way for them to get in, but they would have to be the luckiest team on the face of the earth. And I want to divert us for just a second, because I saw the luckiest team on the face of the earth this week. They are the Denver Broncos. And the second luckiest team in the world this week was the Kansas City Chiefs. Everything is working against the Chargers. Their injuries, their roster, their coaching, the way the ball bounces. They had the refs on their side this week, but it didn't really help them. But their own division and luck is just working again. It's not their year. It's not their year.
You know, the narrative going into this week for the Chargers, Phillip Rivers talked about it for 2 weeks. We need to win these two at home over the Titans and Dolphins, get back to 5-5 at the bye week, and then, make a run over those final 6 games. And it was all shaping up after last week. You had, the Broncos going on the road to face the Saints.
Yep.
You had the Chiefs going on the road to face the Panthers. And then you were going to take care of business.
Yep.
We were thinking the story is going to be very different today. Instead, as you said, in the morning games, really devastating results. Last-second flipping losses to victories for both the Broncos and the Chiefs at the end of the game.
I was really hoping we were going to see a Chiefs loss, a Broncos loss, the Raiders were on bye, followed up with a Chargers victory, and a run right to the playoffs. It was all lining up perfectly until about, 1:04 is when things really got turned sideways. So at this point, knowing that you have to go 6-0 just for a chance, and even that's not going to get you in. So, and we didn't really answer your previous question about Mike McCoy, the end of the season. I believe he should be fired. You thought he should have been fired at the end of last season. I think every week this year he should have been fired. So here's my question. Is it too late to fire him now? Can't they just fire him now? It's a bye week. Isn't this when you fire your head coach?
It is.
Fire him now.
There was certainly no talk of it around Chargers Park this morning.
Morons.
So, had all those scenarios come into play at the Broncos and Chiefs lost and the Chargers won, I would be recklessly optimistic about the Chargers' playoff chances at this point. I mean, really, I'm almost embarrassed to think about how excited
it would have been
I
dancing.
would be going into the bye week.
Dancing on this bar top right here.
I feel bad about that because the same problems that were exposed yesterday are the ones that have plagued the Chargers all season. Too many turnovers, 22 now, I believe, leads the NFL. And, they haven't all been Rivers. A lot of them have been fumbles. But this is not a team that can overcome a negative turnover differential and win games. We've seen that this season. When they've had a positive differential, and they've been good on takeaways, they're among the leaders in the league in taking the ball away, we've seen those are the games the Chargers have won. When they've given it away, those have been the games that the Chargers have lost. They did it again yesterday. Not a big surprise. And Mike McCoy is still the head coach. And while I don't put yesterday's loss on Mike McCoy, it's easy to put losses on the coach. I've done it many times in the past. I don't think coaching was really the issue. There was something I wanted to take a little exception with. So let's get to Mike's mistakes, our weekly evaluation of the head coach. And to me, the big issue this week is timeout usage.
Oh, man.
Timeout usage, because the Chargers seem to do it a little differently than, say, the New England Patriots or other top teams do it.
You think?
To me, John, timeouts are precious. Timeouts are to be used strategically to help you win close games late, whether you need to get the ball back from another team that has it, so you use it to stop the clock, or you need it to extend a late drive in the final minute, turning 1 minute into essentially 2 or 3 through judicious use of timeouts. But that is too rarely how the Chargers use their timeouts. And yesterday, we saw one defensively.
I mean, it shouldn't be used when you're trying to block a meaningless field goal.
And we saw one on special teams, and that one was the real head shaker. The Chargers apparently on the field thought they had too many men. They thought they had 12 guys on the field instead of 11, and someone called a timeout. You can say, well, that's not Mike McCoy. He didn't call it. He wouldn't have called it. Here's the problem. You need to have players aware to know that even if you had 12 and took the penalty, you're not giving up a first down there.
Yeah.
It was goal to go from like the 4 or 5. They're just going to kick it again, likely make it again. Nothing goes wrong except you just burned a timeout for no reason at all. Now, I'm not saying the Chargers would have won the game if they still had their complement of timeouts, but even after Rivers threw the pick 6 to Kiko Alonso, there was a minute left on the clock, 31-24, but the Chargers had no timeouts. That forced Rivers to make, probably an unwise decision because he had to push the ball down the field. The clock was ticking, had to go. You still have a couple of timeouts. You can mix up the plays a little bit. You have a chance at least to move the ball down the field. I doubt they end up scoring a touchdown, but you've got a much better chance when you use your timeouts strategically as opposed to how the Chargers do it. And they must lead the league in defensive timeouts taken to reset their defense, which I think usually is an advantage to the offense. I always think pausing the play, letting the offensive coordinator really think, okay, what's the best play? Make sure everyone's on the same page. Let's run one of our best plays here is more of an advantage than giving the defense a chance to get a breather or get a little different personnel on the field.
I agree, and actually I want to completely destroy Mike McCoy, but before I do that, because I'm looking at the Facebook comments, and a few people have asked, where are we, and how do they get here? And I saw someone say that we're at Social Tap on El Cajon Boulevard by San Diego State. That's not true. There is a Social Tap there. We are at the Social Tap in downtown San Diego, right outside of Petco Park. If you want to come down, not only are we doing this for another 15 minutes, we usually hang out and eat afterwards. So by all means, come down, say hello, and complain about Mike McCoy, because Lord knows we're going to be doing it. It's gotten to the point where Mike McCoy, I don't really want to dig into the finite, should he have punted there? Should he have kicked a field goal? Should he have gone for it? How does he use his timeouts? Because that is almost normalizing the black and white issue here. They're a bad team. And every year, they get our hopes up because they'll do something like beat the Broncos on the road when no one expected them to. Coaching is about consistency. It's about getting your players on the same page every week. It's about getting them excited to play every week. Now, I was one of the biggest Norv Turner apologists you could find when he was the head coach of the Chargers, but I will tell you, Norv Turner struggled with consistency, and Mike McCoy is even worse. The Chargers can win 1 or 2 games a year that no one expects them to win because we know they're terrible. And somehow those 1 or 2 games give us hope that, oh, maybe they're not terrible. Maybe they're good. Look at their record in close games. Look at the same stat I talked about before. They've been in last place for over a year. He's not a good coach. The team is never going to be good with him as the coach. It's over.
I think Frank points out where really is the issue here. He says, this could be
A recording from 3 years ago.
Yes.
And it would still apply.
He hasn't gotten any better.
You're right. We're still talking about the same issues week after week, turnovers, coaching decisions, because Mike McCoy is essentially the same coach when he arrived in San Diego.
Here's something I said yesterday, because I was doing the post-game show with Burt Grossman, and we went to Mike McCoy's press conference, and they were asking him what went wrong. And he said, well, we're going to look at the tape, we're going to find all the little things we did wrong, and then we're going to fix them. Well, number one, you say that every week, and the little things never get fixed. Number two, if he doesn't know what's wrong, if at the end of that game he doesn't know what went wrong, that should be a giant red flag that the guy does not deserve to be an NFL head coach because he's not capable of it.
All right, Lori wants to know, so why can't the Chargers find a decent, good coach? Why doesn't anyone want to come to San Diego? It's a great town.
I'll let you answer. I have an answer, but I'll let you answer.
It's not San Diego. It's not, people don't want to come here. You can make the decision either two ways. It's either philosophically ownership or financially ownership.
Boom.
Why the Chargers have never had one of those big-name head coaches. Because big-name head coaches like a Jim Harbaugh, like a Bill Belichick, who's not going anywhere, but just for example.
Bill Cowher, even Andy Reid.
They want to make 3 times what the Chargers are paying for Mike McCoy and have paid for head coaches in the past.
And they want 3 times as much control over the roster.
And that's philosophically what it is. The Chargers have always employed a split head coach, GM system, overseen by Dean and now John Spanos as president of football operations, in which they kind of divide control in their team. They don't have one super powerful figure like a Bill Parcells coming in as the GM and the head coach who really has full control over the operation. They've never wanted to give it away. If you're a big-time head coach who wants to make that big-time money, you want to be able to choose which players you bring in your roster. You want it to rest on your football knowledge and skills, and that's not the way the Chargers have done it. Now, can it be successful that way? Sure.
You got to get lucky.
You have the right players. It can be a very collaborative system. And I like Tom Telesco as a general manager. It could work. But you're never going to get one of those big-time, big-name coaches to come in and take over a situation like this.
Well, I have a hard time, looking microscopically at every single one of his moves, disagreeing with them. Tom Telesco had a bad week because you looked out at that team, and like I said, it was the starting offensive line that was getting beat up by the Miami Dolphins. It was the starting defensive line, which is now even worse because Brandon Meevane's out. getting pushed around by the Dolphins offense. It was his team that constructed to beat teams better than the Dolphins, getting manhandled by Miami. Did you, at any point in that game, really think that the Chargers were going to win? They got outplayed in every facet of the game all the way through. And the Dolphins are not thought to be a good team. Tom Telesco has to look himself in the mirror this morning and ask, what kind of team have I put together?
Well, they were up 10-0, but I had seen that many times before, so I wasn't getting all that confident. I did feel pretty good when it was 24-24 and the Chargers were across midfield. They had a first down. They were about 10, 12 yards from Josh Lambo's field goal range. They could control the clock, pretty much bleed it down for a final kick. I thought the Chargers were going to win at that point.
You can't bleed the clock without a running game or without an offensive line. At the end of the day, it was this. Phillip Rivers has been carrying this team for the last 3 years. And the problem is, Phillip Rivers can't be great by himself every week of every season. And when he's not great, they get hammered. And yesterday, he wasn't great, and they got hammered. This team, to me, is Phillip Rivers and a bunch of nobodies. And I don't want to say that to Antonio Gates because he's a future Hall of Famer. But at this point, even Antonio Gates is really only effective in the red zone.
All right, last 10 minutes, I want to get to a couple of different topics. One, first of all, where do the Chargers go forward from here? They're out, as we said. Their playoff chances are almost zero. Would take a miracle to get into the postseason. So I've already seen that four-letter word that, we heard about with the Padres for the second half of the season. Now about the Chargers.
Tank.
Is it time to, start, playing other guys, losing games, getting a better draft pick?
All you'd really have to do is just replace Rivers with Kellen Clemens, and you're straight on the tank.
Yeah. One faked injury by the quarterback, and you're all of a sudden a 5-11 team at best.
Right.
The rest of the way. But I don't think that's going to happen. Phillip Rivers is a competitor. He's going to be out there. You've got the Cleveland Browns, the Tampa Bay Bucks on the schedule. You've got 3 home games left. More than likely, the Chargers are going to be where we've seen them, other than last year, almost consistently for the last 7 years under the end of Norv Turner and Mike McCoy.
Somewhere between.
That is 7-9, 8-8, drafting around 15th in the first round, and not being good enough to make the playoffs and not being bad enough to pick up a huge impact player. I am never kind of pro-tank, but when you see what kind of player you can get when things go really long, like last year, and all of a sudden you added Joey Bosa, you start to at least think about the fact, wow, you can really impact your team when you move up into the top 5, 6 picks in the draft. I don't think it's going to happen.
There's no benefit. There's no benefit to trying to win games at this point. I mean, yes, you keep trying to win games until you're mathematically out of it. But at that point, there's literally no benefit to trying winning games, except maybe you send a couple people that bought tickets to a home game home happy. But at this point, the Chargers have been spitting in San Diego's face so long, what do they care?
Also want to do a little post-mortem on Measure C, because Jeff Sinyard and I did a lot of talk about it last week leading up to the election. We all know it failed, 43% of the vote. I wasn't surprised.
No.
Some people are categorizing it as a embarrassing loss for the Chargers. Others are saying, hey, you should be encouraged that 43% of the citizens of San Diego actually want to help you with public money to fill the stadium. That's a good chunk. I don't know whether I would view it either way. But we've been left with this fallout. And just this weekend, I saw 2 very conflicting reports. One was from Jason La Canfora, an NFL insider yesterday, who basically wrote that the Chargers have no options in San Diego. They have no hope for a stadium, and Dean Spanos is realizing that his only option is going to be to move to Los Angeles, and it's going to happen at the end of the season.
And it's worth pointing out that Jason La Canfora has written that same article 3 times this year and released it right before a game on Sunday all 3 times.
That is true.
I don't know why he keeps doing that.
There was also a report from Andrew Brandt, who covers sports business for ESPN, who said similar things. The Chargers don't have good options right now in San Diego. They don't like the option in Los Angeles and don't want to move there, and they don't have any other cities they want to go to, and ultimately reported that means they will likely stay in San Diego for the time being and try to figure something out.
Yeah, why not?
So you've got 2 very different reports right there, but it just goes to show you that the entire saga of Measure C and the Chargers Stadium is too defined by these outsiders who are coming in, when it should be San Diego and San Diegans who are defining the future of the Chargers in San Diego. And I'm just getting tired of reports on both sides coming in from out-of-towners who don't really know our community and what we're trying to accomplish here.
Well, and it's trying to send two different messages is why it's happening. Dean Spanos and the San Diego Chargers continue to tell San Diego, look, we want to be here. We want to be here. Trust us. We want to be here. But Dean Spanos is also trying to send a message to the other NFL owners and the rest of the nation and the rest of the NFL fans. Look, San Diego's not giving us any good options here. We need some help. You guys either need to throw in some more cash or we need to figure out something with LA because it's not working for us. So it's easy to see that the national stories are getting more publicity because they're national, but it's really the result of Dean Spanos trying to send one message to the locals and one message to the rest of the NFL.
I think it's a good point because the local stories that you see focus on the fact that Mayor Faulconer, joined the Measure C campaign,
right.
likely wouldn't have done that unless there was already talk about moving forward after Measure C, since everyone
right.
knew it wasn't going to pass,
yeah.
even the Chargers. Why would you jump on board a losing horse 3/4 of the way through the race? When you're running the Kentucky Derby, the last thing you want to do is jump on the last place horse that's 30 furlongs out when you're coming around the stretch. But that's
right.
what Kevin Faulconer essentially did with Measure C. He got on the nag at the back of the race with only about a furlong to go. We had no chance to win, so he knows something that we don't. And that's why the local stories are kind of focusing on the future and what's next.
Mm-hmm.
I think you made a great point on the national stories, and those are directed toward the other owners, saying, okay, there's a lot of issues here. We're having trouble.
We're not getting any help.
How are you going to help
Diego.
us out? You've kicked in another $100 million, but it might take more than that. Make sure you know that this is not easy sailing for us, and we need help. So, yeah, make sure you view all of those through the proper lens as we move forward, because you're going to hear those same stories coming out on both sides until at least January when the Chargers make a yes or no decision for next season.
Right, and it's important to point out that until something else goes on a ballot in front of San Diego voters, there's literally nothing you can do. Whether or not you buy a ticket and go to a Chargers game is not going to affect whether or not they stay here. Whether or not you go and protest out in front of Chargers Park is not going to determine whether or not they stay here. You have to let the bureaucrats, the politicians, and the team owners to figure this stuff out on their own and hope that it turns out with a result that you're happy with, because there's nothing that San Diego
I don't think it
do.
hurts to make Dean Spanos feel wanted in San Diego. If I'm him, I'm not feeling all that wanted right now because you're getting a lot of hate. You get a lot of people who blame Dean Spanos.
Go
a lot
to
of people
hell!
who voted no.
He tried to leave. He tried to go to Carson.
He's the one who's going to decide whether the Chargers stay or go. Almost unilaterally, he is the one who's going to decide. So whether you like him or not, if you want the Chargers to stay, you really don't want to be saying, hey, get the F out of here. We don't want you anymore.
I think
I'll leave then.
I think part of it, and I think San Diego did this, and I'm proud of San Diego. I think part of it is standing up to Dean Spanos and saying, if you want to stay here, you have to make that call. You have to put in the lump sum, the majority of the cash, because we're not going to do it for you. After you treated San Diego the way you treated us, we're not going to do it for you. That's I think, an even more important message to send him. Because for me, LA is a mirage. I don't think the Chargers can go to LA.
All right, let's wrap up with our 3 questions from Ferris, and actually 3 of the better ones this season, John. Number 1, last night's epic Pats-Hawks matchup. A jolt to the NFL, garnered the best TV ratings for a Week 10 Sunday night football game in 5 years. Experts say the presidential election was to blame for this season's declining ratings. Do you agree?
Nope.
It was a great game. I think that helped the ratings.
It was a great game. It was a Super Bowl rematch from a couple of years ago. Tom Brady is an MVP candidate right now. There hasn't been a lot of good options on Sunday Night Football. Now that you have a good option, it's going to get the ratings that it normally gets. I don't think it's the presidential election causing the downturn. I'm sure it played a role, but by and large, I think it's been poor matchups and oversaturation.
Oversaturation has always been my call.
And parity and oversaturation.
All right, there were lots of good games yesterday. I mean, the Cowboys-Steelers game was
fantastic,
phenomenal. Question number 2, which was more shocking, the Pats' Shakespearean failure to get a touchdown on 4 straight plays inside the 2, or the Broncos blocking that Saints extra point and returning it for the win? And can we finally agree that extra points should be eliminated and replaced with 2-point conversions across the board? No, we're actually seeing entertaining
This is-
extra points.
It's literally an argument for extra points.
It was.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal, the way
Yeah.
that game ended. I mean, not for the Chargers, obviously.
No, but that's about as unlikely a scenario as you can possibly imagine in an NFL game for it to end on that play. So, no, I
But
thought
you
it was,
knew eventually it would. Once they changed the rule this season, by
Yeah.
the way, to make it a 2-point score for the defense if they return it, you knew at some point that's how a game was going to end. And I think you've also seen kickers being affected by the longer extra points. There's been more critical misses, it seems like, this season. I think that's good for the NFL. I do believe teams should go for it more often.
Oh, sure. Like the Steelers do.
You know, especially considering the one is no longer the certainty it used to be. But I like decisions. Make coaches make 1-2-point decisions.
Yeah.
Make those calls. Seattle made an interesting call last night. When they scored the touchdown to go up 7 late in the game, they decided to try to go for 2 to make it a 9-point game and end it, as opposed to the 1, which would make it an 8-point game, but would still require them to both stop a touchdown and then a 2-point conversion.
That's a fantastic decision.
It was interesting. It worked out.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't make it,
Yeah.
but they ended up winning the game anyway. Finally, the playoff picture getting a little clearer after this week. Here are some teams I'm eliminating from contention. Colts, Panthers, Chargers, Saints, Packers, Vikings, and Rams. Bengals are out if they lose tonight to the Giants.
Wait. How do you wipe out both the Packers and the Vikings? Who's winning the NFC North? The Lions?
I don't know. That's a good point. Any beef with my list? So you have a beef with his list.
That's the only beef.
You can't wipe both. Someone's going to win that division.
You can't just say it's the Lions division and no one else has a chance.
At the same time, I wouldn't eliminate the Colts
because that division is terrible.
Houston could easily go on a long losing streak at the end of the season.
Easily.
So
easily.
Wild card, yes, all those teams, but
right.
Division championships are still in play for several of them. And the Rams, I don't think, are necessarily out of playoff contention because the NFC isn't like the AFC, where you have the 7-win teams in the AFC West pretty much locking out the wild card spots.
Right.
It's a lot more evenly distributed.
They can get in
the
with
NFC.
9 wins.
I don't think they're good enough to get in, but they're not mathematically out of it. So, yes, several beefs.
Several beefs.
And speaking of beef, probably going to get the short rib bowl.
Yeah,
for
I'm probably
lunch
doing that
today.
too. It's really good.
Very tasty. If you come later, beef comes in the form of the Monday Night Burger and Beer $10 special.
Great combo.
For that Bengals-Giants game tonight. And as John mentioned, we're at the downtown location outside Petco Park, but there's the new Social Tap San Diego by San Diego State, Art Street and El Cajon Boulevard, right?
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
All right, so check them both out. Thanks for joining us. We are actually not going to be here next Monday because we're going to be filling in on the Mighty 1090 for Darren Smith.
Yeah,
we're taking Bolts on Tap onto the radio airwaves for 3 hours.
3 hours of this.
And then we'll reschedule for a second-half preview edition of Bolts on Tap. Look at our social media for the final scheduling of that. But appreciate you joining us. Enjoy the bye week. Thanks to everyone for being here. For John Gennaro, I'm Ben Higgins. This has been Bolts on Tap from Social Tap San Diego from 10 News.